Look around the world. In Thailand, Myanmar, Pakistan, Sudan, Chile, Argentina, you will find countless nations where, if you turn the pages of history or glance at today's news, military tanks have surrounded presidential residences, generals have appeared on television to announce the suspension of the constitution, and democratically elected governments have been toppled at gunpoint. Military coups are one of the harsh, recurring realities of global politics. Now, think about the United States. The country possesses the most powerful, most expensive, and most technologically advanced military force in human history. Its warplanes, naval fleets, and soldiers are deployed across every corner of the world. The US military is so powerful that, at least theoretically, if it wished, it could overthrow any elected government within a matter of hours. Yet in reality, this has never happened. In nearly 250 years of history, despite severe internal conflict, including a devastating civil war, there has never been a successful military coup in the United States, not even a serious attempt or conspiracy. The country, often accused of changing other nations' governments, has never seen its own government threatened by its military. But why? What invisible armor protects American democracy from its own armed forces? How did the founders of the United States create a system that ensures the sword will always remain obedient to the pen? And what institutional, cultural, and professional forces keep American generals within the fence, always loyal to civilian authority? The answer to these complex and historical questions lies in the nation's very founding, within the political philosophy of its founders. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, all were students of European history. They had seen how generals like Julius Caesar used their legions to seize power in the Roman Republic, and how military leaders like Oliver Cromwell toppled elected governments in England. From these historical lessons, they developed a deep distrust and fear of a large, permanent standing army. They believed that a powerful, professional army posed one of the greatest threats to Republican liberty, because its discipline and strength could easily transform an ambitious general into a tyrant. From this fear, the founders built a brilliant, far-sighted constitutional framework that placed the military under strict civilian control at every level of government. For example, under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces is the president, a civilian elected by the people, not a general or admiral. This means the military's ultimate orders come from an elected politician accountable to the citizens. Any general disobeying the president's commands would be committing outright treason. But the founders did not rely solely on the president to control the military. They divided power even further. Under Article 1, only Congress can declare war, though this rule has often been bypassed in practice. More importantly, Congress controls the power of the purse. Only Congress can approve the military budget, determine troop levels, and allocate money for new weapons. The Constitution forbids approving military funding for more than 2 years at a time. This ensures the armed forces remain constantly dependent on the elected legislature for their existence and resources. Additionally, the Second Amendment, now mostly debated over personal gun rights, was originally rooted in distrust of standing armies. The founders wanted the core of national defense to be a well-regulated militia composed of ordinary citizens. They believed an armed populace would be the ultimate safeguard against tyranny and a hostile occupying army. Over time, this militia concept evolved into today's National Guard, but the underlying philosophy remained: disperse military power among the people rather than concentrated in a single centralized force. These constitutional protections, civilian leadership under the president, financial control under Congress, and a decentralized distribution of power, created a strong foundation ensuring that the U.S. military would remain a tool of the state, never its master. Beyond constitutional safeguards, the structural design of the American military makes a coup almost impossible. In many countries, the armed forces are a unified, centralized institution. But the U.S. military is deliberately divided in such a way that coordinating a unified action against the state is nearly unthinkable. The American armed forces are not a single institution. They consist of 6 different branches: the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Space Force, and Coast Guard. Each has its own command structure, its own budget, its own culture, and often its own institutional interests. Historically, there has been both healthy and unhealthy rivalry among these branches. It is nearly impossible for an Army general to convince a Navy admiral or an Air Force general to join any coup attempt. This internal division and balance of power inside the Pentagon makes it extremely difficult for any single branch to dominate the entire military machine. One of the most unique elements of the U.S. system is the National Guard. It is not a federal force by default. It is essentially the militia of each individual state. Each state's National Guard is commanded by the governor of that state, not the president. This means the United States has 50 separate Guard units under 50 separate commanders. While the president can federalize the Guard during emergencies, under normal conditions they remain under state control. If any faction of the federal military rebelled, state governors could deploy their National Guards to suppress it. This decentralization spreads military power beyond Washington, D.C., into the hands of the states. Moreover, outside the military, the U.S. has a vast network of armed civilian agencies like the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, and DEA, all with their own armed units. Add to this each state's police force, every county sheriff's department, and thousands of local police departments. There are nearly 18,000 different law enforcement agencies in the country. This complex, multi-layered system ensures there is no single center of armed power. To stage a coup, conspirators would not only need to coordinate among all branches of the military, but also overcome resistance from the National Guard and thousands of independent law enforcement agencies. This structural fragmentation is America's strongest practical barrier against a coup. Even more powerful than law or structure is the invisible wall built inside the minds of every American soldier, their professional ethics, culture, and values, which teach them loyalty to civilian rule. At world-class institutions like West Point, Annapolis, and the Air Force Academy, cadets are not taught the art of war. They are taught that their role is not to make policy, but to execute the policies set by elected civilian leaders. They are taught that the mission of the military is to serve the nation, not to govern it. This professional ethic lies at the heart of American military culture. Every service member, from the lowest soldier to the highest general, begins their career with an oath. This oath is extremely important. They do not swear loyalty to any president, general, or political party. They swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The phrase domestic enemies is crucial. It means that even if someone inside the government, even a high-ranking official, attempts to violate the Constitution, the military's duty is to defend the Constitution itself, not that person. This oath places the military firmly in the role of an apolitical guardian of constitutional order. Deep within American culture lies the belief known as American exceptionalism, the idea that the United States is fundamentally different and better because it is built on freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. According to this belief, a military coup in America would not just be a political change, it would be the death of the very ideals that make America what it is. This belief is deeply embedded in the military as well, making the very idea of a coup seem unthinkable, almost a form of treason. The U.S. military, like the country itself, is extremely diverse, drawing members from all races, religions, regions, and political ideologies.
This diversity prevents the rise of any unified, homogeneous faction that might imagine itself the true guardian of the nation and attempt to seize power. This cultural and ideological software is the invisible force that keeps the U.S. military confined within constitutional boundaries. The strength of civilian control in America doesn't mean there have never been conflicts between civilian leaders and military commanders. U.S. history is full of such tensions, but every single one has been resolved through constitutional mechanisms, not through force. During the Civil War, Union Army Commander General George B. McClellan was an excellent organizer but a hesitant battlefield leader. He strongly criticized President Abraham Lincoln's war strategy and often hesitated to carry out direct orders. He personally considered Lincoln an unfit leader and even harbored ambitions to run for president himself. Yet despite all his disagreements, he never considered marching his army toward Washington. Eventually, Lincoln used his constitutional authority to remove McClellan, demonstrating that even in wartime, the civilian leader's decision is final. During the Korean War, General Douglas MacArthur was a legendary and immensely popular commander, but he openly disagreed with President Harry Truman's policy of limiting the war. MacArthur wanted to expand the conflict, even suggesting nuclear strikes on China. He began writing letters to congressional leaders and issuing public statements criticizing the president's policy, a direct challenge to the commander-in-chief. In April 1951, Truman made a bold and controversial decision. He fired America's most popular general. Truman said, "I fired him because he failed to respect the authority of the president. I fired him because I will not allow U.S. foreign policy to be made by a theater commander." This remains one of the strongest and clearest examples of civilian control in U.S. history. More recent examples exist as well. During the Vietnam War, there were serious disagreements between the Johnson administration and the Pentagon. During the war in Afghanistan, General Stanley McChrystal was forced to resign after criticizing Obama administration officials in a Rolling Stone interview. And near the end of Donald Trump's presidency, Joint Chiefs Chairman General Mark Milley reportedly took steps to ensure constitutional control over nuclear authority amid concerns about certain decisions. These incidents show that civil-military relations are not always smooth, but every conflict has been resolved through political and constitutional processes, not through coups. The historical and structural safeguards against military coups in the United States are undoubtedly strong. Yet 21st century America faces new challenges that raise questions about the durability of these protections. American society and politics are experiencing unprecedented polarization. The divide between Democrats and Republicans has evolved beyond policy disagreements into a deep cultural and ideological conflict. This polarization affects the military as well. After all, soldiers are citizens with their own political beliefs. Public trust in democratic institutions, elections, courts, the media, has sharply declined. This erosion creates a dangerous vacuum. When people no longer trust democratic processes, they may begin to consider undemocratic alternatives, including military intervention. Some political leaders have also attempted to use the military for their own political purposes, a dangerous trend. Using troops at political rallies or dragging generals into partisan debates undermines the military's apolitical character. When the military becomes closely associated with one political faction, it becomes harder for it to serve under the other, disrupting the delicate balance of civil-military relations. Meanwhile, the Pentagon itself has acknowledged the growing infiltration of white supremacist and extremist groups within the military. These groups are not loyal to the Constitution, but to racist or authoritarian ideologies. Though their numbers are small, their presence threatens military unity and discipline. The January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol was a direct assault on American democracy. Among the participants were significant numbers of veterans and even some active duty personnel. Although this was not a military coup and military leadership swiftly condemned the attack, it revealed how deeply political extremism has penetrated society, and that even some service members can be influenced by such radical ideas. These challenges do not mean a military coup is imminent in the United States, but they suggest that the historical and cultural foundations that have protected American democracy are no longer as invulnerable as they once seemed.